Welcome back. In this one we're going to be doing health and damage. And so when you shoot a player right now, they just die instantly. But obviously we want you to have to shoot them a few times and they have health, and we're also going to have health pickups later on so that you can replenish your health if you get hit. And along the way I'm just going to be explaining some different concepts to do with Unreal Engine, because Unreal Engine runs on a framework, so there are quite a few things to learn that are specific to just Unreal. And one of those is the game mode. Now, if you go to the first person BP and go to the blueprints folder here, you can see our character is in here, the character blueprint. One thing that I haven't touched on yet is the first person game mode. So let's double click on that and open it up. If we open the full blueprint editor, we can see that it's not really doing anything right now. It's completely empty. It has one component, but that's just the default component that comes with this, so not really that important. And nothing's really going on in here, but the game mode's actually really important, and we're going to be adding some stuff in here later on. The game mode is exactly as it sounds like. It controls how each game mode plays out. Now, since we're making a Battle Royale game, there's only going to be one game mode, but if we had a teams version where you could play as a team, or duos, or solos, we might split those into different game modes. You might, in another game, have a team deathmatch game mode. You might have a capture the flag game mode, and so on. In our videos, we're just going to have one game mode, and we're going to call it Battle Royale game mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to rename these. So I'm going to rename this. If you press F2, you can rename stuff. And I'm going to call this BR game mode. BR meaning Battle Royale. And I'll also rename my character to BR character. I just want to rename these because it's a Battle Royale game, we really want to describe these a bit better. And we'll also delete the first person projectile because that comes with the template, but we don't actually use that in the series, so you can just delete that. One thing in the game mode is you actually select a few things. If we click on the game mode here, you can see we can change in the details panel some different things about this game mode, right? So what character will be used for this game mode, what player controller gets used for this game mode, what HUD gets used for this game mode, and so on. Remember I said in the previous video that the player controller, or the controller, a player controller is a type of controller by the way, but anyways, I explained that the controller is the thing you can't see. So when I'm in the game, the players are these things that you can see, and the controller is an invisible thing that you can't see that controls the character. So that handles all of the controlling of the character. If I click on the game mode, you can see it's just using this custom player controller thing that comes with Unreal Engine. But we want to actually make our own controller going forward. And to do that, it's really simple. You just right click, make a new blueprint, and you can see it's just player controller. Just click player controller, and I'm going to call this BR player controller. We can save that, and then go back into your game mode. And instead of having player controller, click the drop down and select BR player controller. And now it's going to use our own BR player controller. So again, this is the thing that's controlling the player. You can't see it, but it is there. I know that sounds a little hard to sort of understand, but that'll be really helpful going forward. And we'll actually be doing a lot of stuff inside of this player controller class as well. Okay, so let's add the concept of health. We're going to open up the BR character, and we need to add something called health. And also, I want to introduce you to these things called categories. So if I click on a variable, you can see there's this category option here. So we can give it a category. So for example, I've selected weapon, and then I've put it in this category called weapons. And you might also put killed by. I'm going to make a new category for that. I'm going to call it damage/health. And I'll put it in there, so the person that killed you is pretty related to damage and health. And I'll select these here. Gun offset, by the way, we're not using that anymore, we can just delete that. These ones, base turn rate and base lookup rate. I'm going to put these in a category called look/movement. So I'll just put them in there. And that just makes things a lot more tidy later on. You can just categorize things like that. Nice and easy. And just tidies things up a lot more. Now, what I need to do is add a new health variable. So I'm going to go ahead and add a variable, and I'm going to call it health. And health needs to have decimal places. So it's just a number that has decimal places. So we click on float, as I explained earlier. if it didn't have decimal places, you would select integer. So for example, ammo in a gun would be integer, but because we want decimal places, we're going to go with float. And I'm going to put that into my health and damage category. So now it's all tidy. Now, one thing about health is that it's really important that the server controls this value. And also, other players need to know how much health we have. And remember, when you want to tell other players about something, you need to replicate it. So click on health and go ahead and select replicated. Now, as I've explained before, you can select replicated to replicate it, or you can select rep notify to do some sort of special thing when this value changes. And I want to do something special when this value changes, because when my health goes down, I want other players in the game to see me, flinching or playing some sort of, hurt animation. So if you get hit by a bullet, other players can see that you've been hit by a bullet. So we're going to click on rep notify here. And as usual, we'll get this little on rep health thing come up as well. We're also going to make another variable, and so just click on health and then press Ctrl W to duplicate health, and we're going to call this starting health. So this is going to be the amount of health that the player starts with, and I'm going to set this value to 100. I'm going to say that when you start the game, you start with 100 health, and make sure this is not rep notify. So click this and just go none. Okay, so when we begin the game, we need to set the player's health. So you notice in begin play, currently we're just giving our player a weapon. We're going to get rid of this in a little bit, because eventually when we start a battle royale game, we don't have any weapons and we have to go find our weapons. So we'll delete this later on, but we'll just keep it there for now. That's okay. So something that I should have probably mentioned earlier, if you select rep notify or replicated, you need to make sure that the server changes this value. So remember, variables store some sort of value, right? Well, only the server is allowed to change it if it has this on here, replicated or rep notify. So remember, when we set the player's weapon by holding Alt and dragging in, you remember how we set the player's weapon before back in our give weapon function? You can see set with notify. Well, this needs to happen only on the server. It's really important. If this doesn't happen on the server, this value won't really do anything. It doesn't matter. Rep notify means the server handles this. And it's important that it works that way, because remember, things that are sensitive to how the game works should only be controlled by the server. We wouldn't want players to be able to give themselves weapons or cheat in the game in some way. So it's really important that the server is handling that information. So when we begin the game, we're going to set the player's health, but we're only going to do it on the server. To make sure that you're on the server, you can type authority and select this one called switch has authority. The way this works is we connect this into here, and if we're not the server, this is going to be called, and if we are the server, this is going to be called. So we can connect it up like that, and now we know that the health is only going to get set if we're on the server. And we want to set the health to whatever the starting health is. So you can hold Control to get the starting health and just plug it right in. So what we're saying is, if we're on the server, then set the health. And if we did something like that, it would do it on the server and the client. But we don't want the clients to be able to set their own health. So just hold Alt and get rid of that. We should also make sure that we're commenting our blueprints so that we know what they do later on. For example, if I come into this and I'm looking at this and trying to figure out what it does, I'm kind of wasting my time. An easier way is just to drag and select all of this stuff here. And remember, this is our firing logic. So if I press C, I can actually write a comment so that I remember what this does later on. So this is my server firing logic. And check it out. This is now a little more organized and has a comment around it. And I'm going to do this for everything here. So fire gun. This is my client-side shooting FX. So we've got some more comments now, and I'm going to do this one here. This one spawns a weapon. This is our logic to give a weapon to the player. So remember, that just spawns the weapon in, it sets the weapon, and then in the onRep we actually attach it to the player. When we begin play, give player a weapon and set their health. So now when I look at this, it's a lot cleaner and we can sort of figure out what it's doing a little bit better. Now what I want to do is I want to add a function that will allow us to take health away from the player or give health to the player, so that when we get shot we can either take away health or give health to the player. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to right click and make a new custom event. We'll be making custom events all the time, so it's very normal to make a bunch of custom events. I'm going to call this modify health. And just as our give weapon event needs to know what weapon to equip, our modify health event needs to know how much health to take away or give to the player. So under the inputs tab here, I'm just going to click new parameter, float, and I'm going to select health. Okay, so we have this health option here, and remember I said that it's really important that we only modify the player's health if we are on the server. If you're the client, don't bother, because since it's selected as replicated, if the client tries to modify it, nothing's going to happen anyway. And remember, it's important to the game that players can't cheat, and imagine it would be really bad if a player could set their own health to be 1,000,000, then they would be invincible, you know, so we want to prevent this stuff from happening. So make sure that before we modify the player's health, we drag out and type authority and make sure that we're on the server. Remember, if we're on the server, you can drag off this to check. So this is we're on the server and this is we're on the client. So we're going to modify the health. Hold Alt and drag the health in. And we want to set the health and hold Control. We want to set the health to whatever health we have already and then add this amount on. So if we were to pass in 20 to this event and we had 50 health, it would give us 70 health, so we're going to set it like that. Now one thing's really important, if you pick up health or you get some health, we want to be sure that your health doesn't go above the max health amount. So let's click on starting health and we're going to hit Control W to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this max health. Let's say that the max amount of health that you can have is 150. We won't let the player have more than 150 health. One really easy way of doing this is I'm going to hold Alt to break this, and if you type in clamp, we're going to clamp a float. So what this will do is it'll clamp the number, in this case our health, to between the min and max value. So I don't want our health to be able to go under 0, because if it hits 0, we've died. And I don't want it to go above 150, which is our max health. So I'm going to hold Control, drag max health in, and use that as my max. The value is this thing, and now we can set it like this. So we're using clamp to make sure that a player cannot get their health above 150. If we didn't use clamp, you would be able to pick up as much health as you want, and you could, you could have 500 health, and we don't want that to be the case. We want to make sure you can only go up to about 150. If you wanted, you could set this to be higher if you feel that that would be needed in your own game. Okay, so that should be good for now. Built into Unreal Engine by default is a damage system, and I'm going to show you how to use the damage system. Let's just write a comment first. We'll say this event is our logic for modifying the player's health. And so, like I said, there's a damage system. Now, just like we can respond to begin play, we can also respond to the player receiving damage. And this is just a built-in event. It's built into the engine, so we don't have to make a custom event or anything like that. If we just type any damage, you can see there's this event called any damage. So when the player takes any damage, this any damage is going to happen. There's also another one we'll use later on, so we may as well use it now, and it's called point damage. This is used for stuff like firing, where you get hit at a certain point on your body. And we're going to use this later on because we need to know which point the player gets shot at. But for now, any damage is also a good starting point, and we'll use point damage a bit later on. Notice it has this icon here, and this icon means that it only happens on the server. See that little server only thing you can see there? Authority only. This event only fires on the server. Remember, stuff like damage is really important, and that's why it only happens on the server. And the server is just one of the players in the game. So don't get too confused about what a server is. Just know that the server needs to do all the important stuff and you'll be fine going forward. So when we take any damage, we want to modify the player's health. And luckily, we just made an event that will handle the health for us. So when you take any damage, we can just modify health. By the way, we could also do this. We could also drag out and say has authority and make sure that we're only doing this on the server. But because it has this little icon here, we know it's already on the server only as well. So you could put this here if you wanted to. You don't have to though, because we know it's already on the server. So we're going to modify the player's health. And once the player's health's been modified, we're going to check if their health is less than or equal to 0. Because if the player has less than or equal to 0 health, then they got killed by somebody. And then we can make them ragdoll. So we're going to come in, and the way to check if a value is less than or equal to 0 is you can just literally type less than or equal to. And there's this option here, float is less than or equal to float. So click on that. And we want to know if the health is less than or equal to 0. And what this does is it'll give us a Boolean value. A Boolean value is, very simply put, it's just a value that's either true or false. AKA, the player either does have 0 or less health, or it doesn't have less than or 0 health. Right? It's a true or false situation. So how do we check whether the player actually has 0 health, or whether they are still alive and they still have some health? We use something called a branch. So if you drag out and type in branch, and then we connect this up like this, if the health is less than or equal to 0, then we can do stuff off the true pin, or we can do stuff off the false pin if they're still alive. Now, I don't really want to do anything if the player's still alive. If the player's still alive, we don't need to make them ragdoll or do anything like that. But if the player takes some damage and then their health after doing so is less than or equal to 0, we want to make sure that the player gets killed. So, time to do that. You'll see before we actually set the killed by, we're going to do this in a little bit of a nicer way now. I'm going to make a little function down here, a custom event, to handle when we die properly. So I'm going to say killed by. Okay, and we need to know who killed us, so we need to add a parameter. And we're going to say BR character, because the person that killed us is a character. It couldn't be anything else, so make sure that you select BR character. And then call this killer. Killer is the person that killed us, right? So, let's go back, and if our health is less than or equal to 0, we need to take the thing that caused damage to us and see if it was a player that killed us. And remember, to see if it was a player that killed us, we cast. You remember how before we checked if the thing we hit was a character? You remember how we shot and we were able to check if it hit a character by doing a cast? Well, we're doing the same thing here. We want to see, did the thing that killed us, was it a character? So use a cast to figure out if it was. So if our health is 0, we're going to cast, and then we're going to check if something killed us or not. And so if something did kill us that was a player, we're going to use our killed by event that we made. And remember, our killed by event that we made, it needs to know who killed us. And the person that killed us is the damage causer. And remember, we've casted the damage causer into a player. So if the thing that caused us damage was another player, and we're out of health, then we can use killed by and connect this up to say, hey, this person, the damage causer, killed us. I'm going to make another event called killed by environment. And this means we weren't killed by a player, we were just killed by, say, falling into the water that's going to be on the outsides of the island, or maybe the wall closed in, the storm closed in and killed our player. And so all we'll need to know is the actor that killed us. Let's just do that. So we'll put the actor in there. Killer, I suppose we'll call it. So if something killed us, we just need to know what actor killed us. It might have been any actor in the world. Maybe a cube fell on our player and killed them. Well, that was killed by the environment, right? So yeah, if the player didn't kill us, then we know we were killed by the environment. So we'll just drag out from here. Oh, sorry, drag out from here and say killed by environment. And you know what? Actually, let's call this a better name. Killed by. I'm going to rename this to killed by player. So now it's really obvious. This one is for if we get killed by a player, and this one is for if we get killed by the environment. And I'm going to just drag the damage causer node onto killer there. So we can take damage, and then it will handle if we get killed by a player or if we get killed by the environment. I'm going to start by handling the killed by a player one, and let's go to that, killed by a player. And let's just set our killed by, just like we did up here. Remember, we're setting the killed by. Well, we're just doing it in a more neat way, a tidier way this time. So we're going to hold Alt, drag this in, and then connect that up like so, and hit compile and save. So now when we hit a player, we're going to drag out and we're going to type in damage, and there's this option to apply damage to the player. Now there's a bit going on here. The apply damage needs to know a few things. It needs to know who's causing the damage. It needs to know who's instigating the damage, which is slightly different. It needs to know how much damage to cause. And there's also this thing called damage type. And this is saying what type of damage was it? Did the player drown? Were they shot? Basically, we want to know how they were damaged. So let's go and let's just say we're going to apply 30 damage to the player. We're then going to set up the damage causer. So who caused the damage? The person that caused the damage was us. So we could do self. But really, the thing that caused the damage was actually probably the player's weapon, but self should work. We'll connect that in there. There's also the instigator. So that's the controller that was responsible for causing the damage. And we can just type get controller to get our own controller. So we were the ones that instigated the damage. Our player was the one that caused the damage. And for now, we can just leave the damage type class set to damage type, which is just the default one. And there's already an environmental one that's actually made for us, but we'll just select damage type for now. And we're going to apply 30 damage to the player. Okay. So we're starting to get there. The thing is, it's going to take our 30 points of health and cause that as damage. What we want actually here is to do a negative. So we want to take health off the player. Like so. So use a negative instead of a positive there. My bad. That means we're taking health away from the player. Because previously, if we shot someone, it would have given them health, which is a stupid idea. Okay, so let's look at everything we've done. This, you might have to read over this a few times because it is quite complicated, but basically what happens is if we hit someone, apply damage to the person we've hit, 30 points of damage to be specific. Our controller was the one that instigated the damage. Our player was the one that caused the damage. Self, just meaning our player. And just use damage type as the class. When that happens, any damage is going to be called. It's going to modify the player's health. If the player's health falls below a certain amount, then we're going to check who actually dealt the damage and then say, hey, we were either killed by a player or we were killed by the environment. So I know this video has been pretty technical again. I know. Just to make a battle royale game in 3 hours of videos, we need to really rush through it a little bit. So I would recommend supplementing this course if you can, and just learning some blueprints in your spare time. Of course, you can follow these videos without knowing as well, but If you really are interested in learning faster, that might be a better option. But anyways, health now works. So if I shoot someone, it actually takes 4 shots to kill them. Now, here's the really cool thing. Remember before how we made those weapons and we gave weapon a damage amount. Check this out. This is where it gets really cool. So check this out. We'll go into the character, and instead of just dealing 30 damage to them, we're going to deal whatever damage our gun has. So if you go down to weapons, hold control and drag your weapon into the editor here, and then get damage, and then plug that in, this is where stuff gets really, really cool. So each weapon deals its own amount of damage now. So if we go down to weapons and set the scoped rifle to do 100 points of damage, which we did, the scoped rifle should kill people in 1 hit. So ready? Boom. 1 hit kill. Awesome. But if I go back into my player and I give my player the assault rifle, so remember, where is it? Here we go. Give weapon. If we change that to assault rifle, now it's not a 1-hit kill. Because remember, the assault rifle does, I believe, 45 points of damage, which means that we need to do 3 shots to kill someone. If we turn the damage on that up to 55, for example, and hit compile save, now we should be able to kill people in just 2 shots. So check that out. The damage is now based off what weapon you have. So awesome. The weapons in our game will now do different amounts of damage depending on which one we have. Okay, so I know that was a lot to take in again. These videos, I'm sorry, it's just how it is. Making games like this is technical, and it's a lot to take in. Even if you don't fully get everything we're doing, as long as you're picking up a few concepts, that's sort of how game development is when you first start out. You won't get everything. It is a process, and it will take you months to fully grasp what we're doing here. So don't be discouraged if you are a little bit confused, as long as you're able to follow along and get the same results that I'm showing here in the video. So with that being said, that is damage and everything out of the way. In the next one, I think we're going to do ammo. So we're going to give weapons ammo and put reloading into the game. So you'll shoot all the bullets in your magazine and then you'll have to reload the gun. So that'll be in the next video. And anyways, I will see you guys in that one. See you later.